So I was sitting here wondering how to really start this. It's hard sometimes to talk about feelings about situations. It's easy to talk about on an intellectual level how we feel about political situations like the alt-right and the protests and all of that. And the alt-right just becomes a sort of a big conglomerate of sort of a mass of angry people rather than seeing them as individuals. And when I was posting a video 2 or 3 weeks ago, it was at a Columbus statue. There was a alt-right gathering to protect this Columbus statue that was in danger of being taken down, and I think it's already been taken down for reasons that it's representing white supremacy and genocide. And the people there were there were armed people there. And there was one particular man who I stopped to talk about. I was making a commentary on this particular Unicorn Riot video. And he had a bat in his hand. There were a few people with bats in their hand, and they intended to use them on any leftist who tried to attack the statues. And he was goading the journalist who was filming this event and saying, "Aren't you scared?" He said, "You're so scared. You're shaking. You're so scared." And I sort of looked at him, and oftentimes, this probably sounds strange, but oftentimes when I see or when I think of people who are engaged in damaging things, and we all engage in various negative actions in our life, but I often think of people as I sort of think of them as children. Like instead of seeing them as, say, an angry adult, I see them as like a child, like how children are very innocent looking and they're very vulnerable. And I looked at that man, and I've thought about him since, and I sometimes wonder what it was like for him as a child. He seemed to be, even though he was saying to this man, the journalist, "Look at you, you're shaking. You should be embarrassed. You're an embarrassment," he said to the journalist. And the journalist was afraid because there were people standing around him with bats. There were open carry armed people at the protest. And so naturally he was scared. And I looked at him while he was saying that to the journalist. And it makes me sad. It makes me sad. I'm not going to get into psychoanalyzing here or whatever. I'm not a doctor or anything. I'm not a psychologist or whatever. But sometimes I just think, I wonder if when he was young, I wonder if his father was saying to him, while he was bullying him or possibly even abusing him, this may have happened, he may have said to this man, "Look at you. You're an embarrassment. You're shaking. You're embarrassing." I wonder. It may not have happened, but there are reasons why people do what they do, why they react as they do. I can run through some political reasons why that is happening, and just briefly, it's a duopoly and neither party is looking out for the people, really. They're looking out for the 1%, and they're looking out for corporations. So they've abandoned the public. And the Democratic Party is not an alternative. They are not going to do anything for those people at that protest that are protecting that statue. They're not going to do anything for them at all. And they know it. And sometimes voting for somebody who is basically taking the world, taking the country down the sinkhole. It's that saying, the village that doesn't look after the child will burn down the village to feel its warmth. Something to that effect. I often remember that saying. It's an African proverb. And I wonder, if that man had that said to him, either by his father or his mother, or by his family, or whether he just feels that the parental figures that are basically running the show over there, you may as well call them parental figures because they have control over pretty much everything, that he sees that they have completely abandoned him. And yet he's not looking, he can't do anything about those people. I don't even know if he sees the powers that be that are the problem. He probably doesn't. But he's angry, and he wants to express that anger. He wants to take it out on someone. And sadly, as many people who turn out to be bullies do, they end up taking it out. They end up punching down. They take out their anger and the frustration and their sadness, because underneath it all, it's just hurt, really. Hurt is what's underneath pretty much anger and violence. There's a lot of hurt underneath it. And it becomes something ugly because it can't be expressed by some people. So that's the way they express it. So underneath it all, I could see, maybe I'm projecting, but I could just see in his eyes, I could see that he was afraid too, even though he was saying that to the journalist. He was afraid, and I saw him as a little boy. It's sad, isn't it? It's sad that things are the way they are. And it's sad. It's sad that people are turning on one another. And it's sad that some people in power are completely bereft of empathy. I feel sad for them, too, because that's its own punishment. Anyway, I have good wishes for that man. Whatever hurt he feels that is turned into something toxic. And that includes, of course, societal pressures and gender stereotypes. These gender stereotypes are not healthy for people. They're oppressive. I think all those factors rolled up into one, instead of being able for him to just feel terrible pain and grief, to be able to feel that really. It's become something else, something that is not healthy, something that all that pain that he hasn't dealt with is externalized and is going to be put onto someone else or a group to make them feel that pain he feels. And we're so capable as a species of otherizing groups. We do it within our own circles. We do it to other races, to other species, because we're not vegan. We're constantly otherizing and labeling in our mind when we walk around on this earth. But a lot of what we see and how we see it is through our own lens. We're like a projector, projecting our own little movie onto everything. Everybody is telling themselves a story about what's happening around them, what they think that person is, what they think that person is thinking, what they think that person is thinking about me, when that person is probably too busy thinking about themselves and wondering what other people are thinking about them. We're living in our own heads all the time, telling ourselves stories, racking up fear about events that haven't happened and may never happen, feeling guilt and remorse and ruminating about things in the past that are gone because we only have now. And at some point we have to let it go, let ourselves off the hook, so to speak. If we don't let ourselves off the hook, who's going to do it for us? And on top of everything, that man probably can't afford counseling even if he wanted counseling, which he probably doesn't even think about, because he might have been told all his life to suck it up, or maybe he wasn't. Who knows? I try not to see people as groups, even though I talk about them on this channel as groups, and I talk about, and sometimes I might be sounding harsh about it because I'm so frustrated that so much ignorance is driving the suffering. But I never really feel sort of hate for any particular group or individual, because there's reasons for everything. These things don't come out of nowhere. And also, we're all just trying to be happy in the end. And unfortunately, we tend to make other people unhappy in the pursuit of our own happiness. Don't we? And then I hear these little frogs in the background here, one of my favorite sounds. That and rain on the rooftops. But every night I come out here and I hear the frogs, and there's hundreds of them. Unfortunately, we can't hear them in the house because we have fairly good insulation, but on some nights we can actually hear them through the walls sometimes, very faintly. And when I go out and I think about them, they're down the hill there near a dam, most of them, and then there's some on the hillsides here and around the house. And they just sing along all night, just happy to be in the grass, happy to be with their other fellow frogs, happy to be alive. Can you hear them? And it makes me feel happy. I feel it right here when I hear them all singing along together every night. Every night. Just all night. Singing, croaking along together. Just happy to be alive. Living in the now. I don't know what makes me think of that. I think it's just such a soothing sound. Do you ever stop and think about those individuals sometimes? Or think about them as children what they were like as children, when children are they're so genderless, children, really. They're so accepting and innocent. They just accept what's around them. They're not making any judgments on anything when they're very, very young. And somewhere we just lose that. But it hasn't gone, it's there still. It's just that we've covered it up with layers and layers of judgment and thinking and calculating about everything, and trying to put them in categories to make sense of everything. But one of the wonderful things about little, very young children is their acceptance of others. Very young, where they haven't even formulated words yet. Anyway, this is really just a ramble, but I wanted to talk about that man with the bat, because there were things that I just saw in him that made me sad, and there's so many like that. And I don't ever want to lose sight of anybody's humanity, no matter how lost in their pain they are and how they turn that into inflicting pain on others. I don't know how that can be healed. It would help if we had functioning democracies, but most countries at this point don't have that. It would help if we had communities that supported each other, but there's not a lot of that either. I don't know what the answer is, but I hope that pain is somehow resolved in non-violent ways. I feel like something good might come of all this terribleness. I think it's like a boil that has burst, and now we're seeing all the ugliness. But if a boil doesn't burst, then it could basically turn into something systemic that kills us. So I guess that's one way of looking at it.